Sometimes the most complicated looking paintings turn out to be, well, some of the easier ones you could paint, like this one. But if you want to know more about that, sit tight. We'll wind back the clock and see where this painting started out. Hello, welcome back to the studio. Well, as you can see, there's nothing on my canvas yet. That's right, I asked you what you wanted me to paint for you. I sent a little quiz out and you've chosen. If you don't know by now, you should do. It was B, that wonderful glowing light coming through the trees. So that's what I'm painting for you this time. Now, don't worry if you think I'm not going to paint the others sometime. I will do, it's just I want to know what you wanted to do today. Now, this is a mixed media painting. I say that because I think people get a little bit confused sometimes if I'm painting in acrylic or oils. Sometimes I paint in both. So the very first part of this painting will be in acrylics at stage 1, and then I'll let that dry completely, and then I'll be painting in oils for the remainder of the painting. So, you know what to do. Sit back and relax, notepad at the ready maybe, and let's see what we can do.
So here's my canvas, 16 by 20 landscape, painted with buff titanium white. And here's the reference photograph. And as usual, the first step is establishing the horizon line. Then I know where the water reflections will be and the sky. I've put the horizon line just a little lower than halfway, at 7 inches. I draw a faint line. This will give me somewhere to work towards. Next, I want to position the tree. And for this, I break all the rules. The sunrise is dead centre, 10 inches. No rule of thirds for this painting. Now, knowing where the centre line is, we can work out the size. Make a little mark and then try and work out roughly how far across to the side you want to go. I decided to go about halfway across between the sunlight and the side of my canvas. This isn't critical, but getting a rough outline, roughly the right proportion, really would help. But as I say, this is just a rough sketch. This style of painting doesn't rely upon absolute accuracy. As you see, I stand back and make a few adjustments. Once I think I'm happy, I'll just make it a little stronger. But keep checking those sizes and proportions. Make small adjustments and then stand back again. The next part of my painting is acrylics. Remember, this is a mixed media painting. Here are the paints I'll be using. Some raw umber and some burnt sienna. I want to put out a small amount on a plate and a piece of my favourite car sponge. No fancy, natural sponges for me. I'm going to start off with a little bit of the raw umber first. And take a little bit of the burnt sienna into it. Give it a few taps. Distribute it through the piece of sponge. Now, I want to keep the central area fairly open, so I'll start at the edge. I'm looking here just for that nice broken pattern. Notice that I turn the little piece of sponge in my fingers on a regular basis. I also drew my outline a little smaller than I thought the finished painting would need to be, so I can cover it up. Again, do a little stand back. Do a few more taps, but don't let it grow too big, and that's a top tip. They tend to get a little out of shape. Keep on building up the pattern, adding little bits at a time. I might change to a slightly reddier colour for the lower section of my painting. So I've gone for the burnt sienna in certain sections. Once I think I'm happy with this part of my painting, I'm going to work on just adding maybe a little bit more darkness to the centre. Take it steady, little steps. Now, what about a reflection? Well, I didn't bother drawing that. I'm just going to freehand it. Just remember, reflections don't need to be perfect to work. After all, reflection could be slightly different shape and proportion to the main painting. As you see here, things are not quite the same. But I try and make them match a little bit. There. For the final part of my acrylics, I want to add a few branches. When you look at the reference photograph, you'll see right through the centre of the painting here, there is a branch or two. They're not very obvious, so don't spend too much time on this. I'll add one or two to the reflections as well, but I've got to say I wasn't that keen on them, so I did the next best thing. I covered it up. That's right, I just picked up my piece of sponge and whilst the paint was still wet, I just dabbed over it. Well, you didn't notice it, did you? So, my fix was a success. It's a good idea to use a little bit of artistic license when you're doing these backgrounds. Remember, this is going to be permanently on your painting. You won't be able to change it once you start working in oils. So add all those little fiddly diddlies and details, and as Bob would say, the little doers. Then, the acrylics must be completely dry before you use your oils. So let's get started with the oils. Before I start, I always run my hand over the canvas just to make absolutely sure it's bone dry. I'm going to start with this Bob Ross Liquid Clear Oil Paint. This is a wet on wet oil painting technique. I want to apply a thin even coat of this with an old Bob Ross landscape brush. I take a small amount, as you can see, it's like sort of thin runny honey. I want to scrub this onto my canvas. Be quite vigorous with this. I start at just one corner and give it a really good scrub. As I mentioned, we're looking to apply a small amount. You don't want to overload the canvas. I check it using my fingertips, but top tip, just a thin coat. I apply it to the entire canvas, scrubbing it in and then finishing off with some long flat strokes. If you've not used Liquid Clear before or you're not sure about how to use it, I made a little video all about it. I'll leave a little link to it up here in the corner of the video. I want to use this brush again, but don't forget, give it a good dry clean. We don't want that excess Liquid Clear getting into our paint. Here's my palette, and as you can see, some of them are marked with a T for transparent, some semi-opaque and some opaque. I'm going to start mainly with transparent colours, like this one, Indian Yellow. Take a small amount onto that old 1-inch brush we use for the Liquid Clear. As I said, it's a transparent colour, so it's a glaze. It means I can paint it directly across our acrylics that were dried. This painting has an overall goldy sort of theme to it, hence my use of buff titanium for my background colour. If I'd gone for a grey, well, it might have given me such a nice result. From experience, I know that this colour may be, well, a little bit on the weak side. So a top tip, if in doubt, add a little bit more. More is better than not enough. Otherwise your paintings can look, well, a bit washed out. Next, I want to add a lovely warm orangey colour to my painting. For this, I'm using the transparent Indian Yellow and a touch of bright red. Red being semi-transparent or semi-opaque. And I want to mix them together, but retain that sort of slightly glazed look. You'll see, as I work over the top of the bushes, that the red tends to make the colour a bit more sort of foggy. It stands out against the dark colours. It's not quite such an easy glaze to work with. But I scrub it on thinly and let it mix with some of the Indian Yellow that's already been applied. This is what gives our painting its glow, but I can always scrub off the excess if I need to. This is an extremely pleasant way of painting because the background painting is already done and it's fixed and it's permanent. If I don't like something, I can always scrub it off. Here you see once again, the red creates sort of misty glow on the water. I check my painting against the reference photograph. Now remember, the reference photograph is for inspiration, and we must use a little bit of artistic license. I recognise there are some areas like the centre here. I want to do that a little bit more open for the sunlight. It's very important that you don't overwork your painting. It's time to announce some pickup potential ahead. You see, I want to now mix up a nice lavender colour. Glittering crimson, phthalo blue. Well, I've got a bit of red already on the brush, so that won't be a problem, will it? Well, let's see. It's starts out looking okay. Crimson, phthalo blue makes a lovely lavender tone, but as you see, I work it into the brush and it starts to sort of pick up a bit of a brownish sort of tone to it. I'm so concerned I won't use it in my sky. I'll test it out down in the water. Down in the bottom corners, it's a safe place. I'm not convinced I like this colour very much. No, it's the wrong colour. The funny thing is, do you think if I use it long enough, it'll improve? No, it won't. So, what's the problem? Well, it's all to do with that red. You see, I've found from experience that every time I mix red on a brush with anything, it always produces this sort of dirty dark brown red colour. It just doesn't play nice. Time to use a fresh brush. I clean up my palette and let's try again. A little touch of alizarin crimson and a tiny bit of phthalo blue, and instantly I get a lovely fresh colour. There, just what I was hoping for. I can have it slightly more to the reddy side, the pinky side, or I can go a little more to the blue side. When these colours get to yellow though, we have to be a bit careful because it can produce a green colour. But actually I don't mind too much. The technique I use to avoid this is a thing called dry brushing. This is where I let the brush run out of colour completely and then barely touch the colour beneath it. As you can see, just the merest hint of green. But I do want a bit of a halo effect, a backlight to the tree of course. So again, using that brush and the liquid clear, I can just simply move colours out the way and create this lovely glow effect. This is one of the most fun aspects of using this style of painting. You can add things and rub them out and change them. In fact, it's what makes this painting beginner friendly. It is just so fixable. Talking of fixable, what should we do with this mess? I think we can simply wipe it off. But remember, this painting is still a bit on the green side, so I'm going to use a little piece of paper towel and just gently rub the surface, but don't go scrubbing it, it'll take everything off. If the painting were a couple of weeks older, well, it'd be a different story. I think I'll add a little bit more blue-grey colour into the corners here, maybe a slightly stronger lavender. Again, using a little more of that artistic license. Notice how that slightly darker corner really throws your eye to the centre of the painting. I think that looks rather nice.
So here's my painting after the first glazes have been applied in oils. Now, I wanted to just sort of make a little mention here about the strength of colour on our canvas. Something which I see very often, and something I used to do, is I would be a little bit timid with the amount of colour I put on. As you see, most of the colours I've been using are transparent. The Indian yellow is transparent, crimson, blue, all sort of transparent colours. The red is semi-transparent, which is the reason why you can see some of that on the painting. The challenge comes when you're a bit sort of lacking in colour. The painting can end up looking very grey, a bit like this. If I adjust the colour balance of this video, everything tends to sort of just, well, look a bit sort of bland and a bit sort of dull. Don't be afraid to put a bit of colour into your painting. It will really help warm things up and bring it to life. Now, let's see if we can put that lovely sparkle of light in our painting. I have to hold my breath for this one.
I think it's time we added some light to this painting, but I think this brush has had enough use. I'll use a nice clean one for this, because I know I want to keep my colours bright and sharp. First thing I do is take a little bit of that orange and yellow colour into my titanium white. In fact, I won't use pure titanium white anywhere on my painting. It's just too stark. There. Let's have a go at adding a little bit of a sparkle of light just here. Using just the corner of my 1-inch brush, I just want to tease in a little bit of colour here. It's a twirling action, just using the corner of the 1-inch brush, but a bit too much paint, I think. Top tip, start out with very little light on your brush, if I can use that expression. you want to add this very gently. The titanium white paint is incredibly opaque. It wants to turn everything flat and bury it. But if we're careful and we twirl it in gently, it becomes semi-transparent and looks just like mist. But you have to go easy with it. I prefer to put on a little bit less, and then add a tiny bit more and build it up slowly in layers. As you see here, I look at my reference picture and I see where the light trails are, either side of that dark central area. I add a little bit and I lean back and add a little bit more and then stand back again. Bit by bit, I increase the intensity of light. It's time to add the sunrise to my painting. Once again, titanium white tinted with a little bit of Indian yellow. I take a small amount, slightly more, on the corner of my 1-inch brush, and I'm going to aim between those branches, just there. Again, just a few hairs on the corner of the brush. I go into my painting, give it a little twirl. It doesn't matter if I cover up some of those branches. The light streaming through from the background sort of burns them out of the image. I think for the time being, that's as bright as it needs to be. You'll see later on, I come back and have a little play with that. I look at my reference photograph and notice a few bits of dappled light here and there coming between the branches. I think it looks just about right. No need to do any more. But it's very tempting though, isn't it? When you do your own version, you can add as much light as you like. Here you see, I can't resist having a little dabble with it. But I'm using so little paint that really I can't get myself into too much trouble. But keep in mind that little voice in your head that says, I'll just. What you should be hearing is, I'll just stop. Somehow we hear, I'll just add a little bit more. Let's have a look at our reference photo, particularly here and here. Can you see there's a sort of smoke on the water effect going on? I need to just add a little bit of a misty effect to the watery areas. I've got my 1-inch brush and it's got hardly any paint left on it. But just here, under this light spot, I press and pull straight down. I want to just leave the merest amount of paint on here for that sort of smoke on the water effect. Reminds me of a song from my past. It's a subtle effect, but one that I think really kind of lends to the water and reflections. Now, a little top tip for you. I want to add some rays of light, and well, sometimes my hand's not that steady. If you don't have a marl stick, I'll just use a clean dry fan brush and drag it along a long handle brush to move some of that paint. I didn't add any to the brush. Again, this is a subtle effect. Don't use too much pressure on the brush. Just a few little flicks, and you'll be amazed at how many little rays of light you can develop, almost like magic.
So I thought I'd just take a moment to interrupt my little tutorial to remind you of something very important, and that is to take your time. Enjoy the process. Don't rush it. I have said in previous painting tutorials that I'd like to stand back from my painting. I stand back and look at my painting more than I actually spend painting it sometimes. And it is the standing back and thinking about what you're doing that will enable you to see your progress. If you rush headlong into it, well, you might just overlook something which you later on think, oh, I could have done that a bit better. So, top tip, take your time. Enjoy it.
It's another bravery test time. I load my nice 1-inch brush with a little bit of brighter colour. White, still tinted with some Indian yellow to the orange side. And here we go. Press and pull down firmly. I want to leave a real sharp colour here. Touch, press and pull down. Now work to the left and right. I don't really want to be adding any more paint to my brush, but but I want it just to run out. If there's still too much on the brush, give it a dry clean. I want to use just the smallest amount of paint now. There's a great temptation of turning everything into a complete fog, so try and resist doing too much with this. I want to keep our eyes in the centre of the painting. To finish off, I just go across gently, just the smallest amount of pressure on the brush. One last little thing I want to try and do is to soften up that really hard line here. I dry clean my brush one more time, and then to add to that little misty effect, I just tap. I go backwards and forwards across that little horizon line, creating more of a misty effect. This really has to be one of the most fun paintings to do for anybody. There are lots of special effects, and as I said before, you can have a play with it, and if you don't like it, well, you can always rub things out. And with that, we might have a finished painting. Or have we?
So there you have it. A lovely sunrise painting. I think it was easier than a lot of people thought it would be. But we don't have to leave it here, because there's one more step you could take with your painting, but it's not for the faint of heart, and that is to add a glaze of colour. My painting has been sat on my easel and it is just touch dry, and it's really a bit too green to touch, but well, for the sake of the video, I'm going to have a go at it. But if you're going to try this step, I'd say leave your painting for a good week or two. Make sure that the surface is really hardened off before you attempt to do anything else. If you try something and it doesn't work out, at least you could wipe it off. With me, well, it's jeopardy. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong. So let's sit tight.
To make my glaze, I start with just a few drops of linseed oil. I'm going to use this very soft fan brush. I wet it first, then add a small amount of Indian yellow, already a transparent colour. So this would be a yellow glaze, but I want to make it slightly more orange. So I'm going to use some red. The challenge here is that red is semi-opaque. In other words, if I use too much of it, it makes my glaze go sort of foggy. I'll blend these colours very well and then try a little test. Fingers crossed. I'll use a little bit here along these sun rays. Again, just touch, small amount, and just gently blend it into the canvas. Glazing is a subtle process. You'll see in a minute when I get a little bit carried away. Here you see, as I work over any of the light rays underneath, they pick up that lovely sort of reddish tone. Well, that's a little bit too strong, I think. I'll blend it out a little bit more. Take regular steps back from your painting. Here you see, using a glaze over a bright colour produces a light tone. But I've made a mistake. I added a touch of white to my paint, and glazes must be transparent, so instead it just goes pink. Let's fix that. I've got a baby wipe, and very carefully I just lift off that little bit of excess paint. If you do this, don't forget, make sure you give your brush a good dry clean. Then pick up a little bit more glaze, no more white. In this next little bit of time lapse, you see how I gently build up the brighter colours in my painting. I do a little bit here and a little bit there, and then stand back, and then do a little retouch. Finally, I give my brush a good dry clean. I want to use it just to soften out all of those little blushy highlights that I put onto my painting. Right now, some of them look, well, a little bit sharp. This is the reason why I use a nice soft fan brush. I want to blend the colours. Let's soften this area up too. And I think maybe just a little touch of red over on the right hand side as well. I'll even add a few little touches of red peeking through over the trees and through the trees on the right hand side. Again, artistic license. Have fun with it. Of course, I won't forget to reflect that colour down in the water. I take one final step back from my painting, and I think I could probably just increase the brightness here of the sun bursting through the trees. I use one of my favourites, a little cotton bud, a touch of white, a little bit of Indian yellow on it, and just put in some dappled light. Top tip, don't make it into a ball, just little speckles of light, maybe some to the left of the tree trunk as well. And there you have it. How to paint a lovely sunrise using mixed media and the Bob Ross style.
So there we have it, a lovely finished painting, complete with some lovely coloured glaze right at the very end. Now, if you've enjoyed watching this tutorial, don't forget, give it a little thumbs up and a like. It lets YouTube know I've done something which you're enjoying. But don't move, because there's actually lots more lovely videos just like this for you to watch next. Happy painting, people!